Welcome to MatchingHeads Episode 2, the podcast about startups in Europe. Today we will meet Mogens Nørgaard, who will talk about big data, his famous firing from Miracle, the company he founded 14 years ago, and his new company Fair and Square. Enjoy the episode. Hi, I'm Zubair from MatchingHeads, and today I'm with Mogens Nørgaard, and we're here at the World Trade Center, which is where his latest company, Fair and Square, is. So, welcome.
Thank you.
And could you tell us a bit about Fair and Square?
We started it in late 2013. A friend of mine, an old friend of mine, Ole Quraishi, and I. And we're 6 people now doing traditional stuff. Database administration for customers, coding for customers, project management, and so on. But we have a dream of catching on to the whole big data wave when it hits Denmark, the whole new revolution coming to Denmark. Ole also is working on a way of revolutionizing the way of making applications. But that's another story. We're not finished with that.
Is that part of Fair and Square,
yes,
the company?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So at the moment, a small company with a few consultants, and hopefully in the future we will catch on to these new developments.
I went to your website and I saw a lot of MongoDB and stuff like that.
Yes,
so
that's part of the whole big data technology stack.
Okay,
made possible today.
So what are the main areas that you consult in?
Oracle and Microsoft and IBM databases.
Okay.
And related, the lower half of the stack.
Okay.
We have some very, very good coders,
okay.
World-class coders, and a program manager, project leader.
And you're also building this product for developing
applications.
Is that like web applications?
It'll be 10th generation application.
Is this like your top secret project?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes,
now I want to know what it is.
Yeah. That's what Ole is working on together with a few good friends.
Okay.
And it promises to be rather revolutionary, I would say. And he has done it. He has done it in a previous company he worked for.
Okay.
But that. They kept the code, of course, naturally, and we have to recode.
Okay, cool.
And before that, I was CEO of a company called Miracle that I was co-founder of in 2000.
A lot of people in Denmark have heard of it.
Yeah. And I was kicked out from my own company and then created Fair and Square together with an old friend of mine, Ole Quraishi. And we're about 18 months into the process now. We aim at some, shall we say, wet dreams we have. One is the whole big data scene, not in terms of analytics and reams of data, but in terms of the new way of putting together IT infrastructure, which will revolutionize everything we do.
So this is Fair and Square, what you want to do with this company?
Yes. But so far, people are not biting. It's too early. We are 3 years behind the US, so it'll probably happen for real next year.
Is it happening in the US at the moment with companies like Cloudera and people
massively,
like that?
Massively. And even when I go to the old world conferences, Oracle conferences and all that, people are talking about big data. A third of the very knowledgeable Oracle experts that I have in my network called the Oak Table Network have moved into this new world.
Sorry, what's this network?
The Oak Table Network is a network of possibly the 100 best Oracle people in the world. The authors, the lead architects from Oracle. So it's both inside and outside of the thing. And it's named after my kitchen table, my oak table back in my kitchen, because it was founded there.
Okay.
And a lot of them are moving into the old world.
Okay.
The new world, sorry, also. So that's what we're aiming at. It has started now in the UK, not just the government side. The spooks and the military in general, they saw the possibilities of these massive Hadoop clusters and what have you immediately. But on the commercial side, they're beginning to see.
So you were saying about in the States being a few years ahead of Denmark.
Absolutely. When I got fired, one of my friends in California.
From when you got fired?
I got fired from my own company. Weird experience.
Okay, I want to come back to this.
I do belong to an exclusive club, I believe.
Okay, let's come back to this later because I've got a lot of questions about this firing.
All right. Yeah. It's something no person should be without. It completes you as a human being. Okay. No, it doesn't. After I got fired, the day after, the rumor spread.
When did you get fired?
This was in July 13.
Okay.
June 13.
From the company you founded?
Absolutely.
It's funny because I said I want to come back to this, and I keep wanting to talk about it.
So a friend of mine, Jeff Needham, who lives in California and does big Hadoop stuff, and saw the whole thing and worked for Hortonworks and what have you.
What's Hortonworks for people?
Hortonworks is equivalent to Cloudera. It's a full stack vendor of open source software that you can put on the Hadoop technology. So he wrote to me, and in this rather short email he said to me, whatever you do in your next company, you have to look at big data. It's the last infrastructure revolution before we retire. P.S. I have attached my book. And that's kind of a strong message.
What was his book?
His book is called Disruptive Possibilities.
Okay.
It's available free of charge from Amazon, from O'Reilly, what have you, and Hortonworks.com. So I started wondering, is this big data not the BI in yet another form? Is it really something else? I didn't know. And it was, and it is. Later I went to a big data conference in the US, in Santa Clara, California. And it was a surreal experience. People were much younger than I. They were all in their 20s and 30s. There were 100, 150, to me, unknown companies in the exhibition hall that were all very gung-ho about this whole new world. The old world was represented by big stands with IBM, with VMware, with Microsoft. And they had all the magicians and the booth babes and everything that we are used to in the old world. And basically people didn't see them. It was like a teenage...
They didn't see the big companies, you know?
No, they walked past them. They didn't see them. On the VMware stand, 3 guys were standing like this just for those 2 days.
Okay.
So it was like teenage boys walking past an 80-year-old woman.
But what was the conference called?
Strata.
And was it a big data conference?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was like teenage boys walking past very old ladies. They didn't see them. People didn't see them. And it was like the 80s, the mid-80s, when I started working on relational databases, and I became part of the revolution and later joined Oracle and all that stuff. It's like, this whole thing is like holding up a mirror. What I'm hearing these young people say to us old farts about how this is fantastic. And I hear myself saying, well, maybe there's also some problems, and maybe some of the old stuff is good enough. They just go, what? It's old. We need to create something new.
Okay, but...
So it's a revolution.
But can I ask you, when we say big data, there's always the hype of the term. But when we say big data, what do we mean by big data first?
So, big data was a term coined by people at Yahoo. The engineers there were tasked with the following. Build a new IT platform that is very cheap because we don't have any money, that will never lose data, that is blindingly fast, and will web scale to 200 million users, which is what we have currently. The engineers there thought the only way we can achieve this is by using the lowest common denominator, namely cheap Taiwan PCs, servers. Because you get a lot of bang for the buck there, as opposed to all the old companies' big iron things.
Are all PCs made in Taiwan these days? I guess so.
Yeah,
yeah,
and in China, and the point, among other things, is that those PCs made by white label producers are the most stable in the world, because if there ever is any return, they lose their profit because the profit is so low.
So you commodity PCs?
Absolutely,
and
commodity servers, and this is late 90s.
Late 90s?
Yes.
Okay.
And
is this before Google had
yes.
Mac produced?
Yes, they hatched onto the idea. This was done by Yahoo engineers.
Okay.
And a guy named Cutling came up with a piece of software that did two things. It acted such that it made a supercomputer out of many cheap computers, and it was an operating system. And he named it after a toy elephant that his boy owned, named Hadoop.
Yeah, because the logo is an elephant head, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, the Yahoo guys expected that they would come to handle a hell of a lot of data on this new platform. Hence, they termed it big data.
Okay.
But
that makes sense.
Since then, people have confused it with, it has to be a lot of data. No, it's an architecture.
Okay, so
it's an architecture. It's a way of putting together IT systems that generates the most powerful, fastest, cheapest, and most reliable computer mankind has known.
So it could be called a supercomputer as well.
It is what Cutling himself says in interviews. This is a supercomputer made out of many cheap computers.
Because when I think of big data, I always think of this is data that a company can use for analytics. Or
Nope.
is this just...
Nope. So it's an infrastructure, it's an architecture, it's a stack. And it is known as the big data world.
And okay, so that's
So the basic is the Hadoop platform. Then there are millions of, there isn't, but thousands of new programs and NoSQL database and what have you that will operate on the Hadoop platform and create a stack of more or less interesting software. And the wet dream, the nirvana up here, the heaven, is what is called machine learning, which is a new variation of artificial intelligence, algorithms and statistics that learn from data coming in every day.
So these are applications that can run on top of big data, because that was kind of...
You've got lots and lots of ordinary applications being created in the middle, but the very top of it is the analytics of machine learning, where it actually will try to gain new insights, whereas with BI, you run the same reports every night. So that's good for management to know that the supermarket on Nørrebro in Copenhagen did not so well yesterday as it did the day before that, but it's the same report every day.
This is what I wanted to get to. What's the main business driver that if I'm a company, that I will say, okay, I want to get big data in now? I mean, what's the benefit for my company?
So let me address it on several levels. First, this whole platform will create massive storage and CPU power for nothing.
When you say for nothing, for...
Well, so a 40 server cluster with 2.5 terabytes of RAM that can be used together, of so much storage you can't believe it, will cost you less than $100,000. And remember that everything I just mentioned here is available as open source for free. And a lot of it you can also buy or get with a service contract attached. But all of it is free.
And how much would this have cost, like even 5 or 10 years ago?
So
this power.
Yeah. The old world, Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, VMware, EMC, SAP, all those things are basically, pardon my French, because they because they rely on a license fee per CPU. Now, what's 40 single CPU servers with 6 kernels in each? That'll be 120 CPU licenses for Oracle, each of them $47,500. It's not gonna. So that's why basically the business model of all the old companies is broken.
But what is it? So why can't these companies switch to a service model? Does it even make sense for them?
So now we are into the usual discussion of, can you actually catch up with something disruptive happening in your backyard?
Yeah.
Usually not, but it will take a while. We are at the moment seeing sand being removed under the giant's feet.
It's very hard when a company has the carpet pulled from out under them, it's very hard to stay standing. So I understand what you mean.
But it takes years where sand is removed and nothing happens to the giant, and then suddenly, and that's why we see them fail so fast sometimes, these big companies, which is why one day we'll see Microsoft fail as fast as Nokia did. Anyway, Oracle and Microsoft are all about big data these days. They're talking about it. There's lots of presentations about it. They're really trying, because big data is the only game in town in the US now. It's the only game in town in the Valley. All venture capital is going into things on top of Hadoop. All the new kids coming out want to work with this and just view this old world as something horrendous. All new companies use these technologies. They are free. They are brilliant. And they can get programmers that actually like to work with this. This is hot stuff. So Oracle and Microsoft have both created something they call a big data appliance, which is a machine with a few CPUs, several disks, and then they have taken the Cloudera stack in Oracle's and the Hortonworks stack in Microsoft's appliance, and then made an interface so that you can move data from Hadoop inside this machine to the real database, the MS SQL, the Oracle database. It's harder to move it the other way around, and you need to, believe this or not, pay license fees per disk drive.
So the business model is such an outdated one, you're saying.
Totally. And they're trying to catch up, but all these customers that suffer from the Stockholm syndrome, they want to support the vendors that are actually keeping them hostage, that are holding them hostage, like Oracle, Microsoft, and all that stuff. They will go, okay, yeah, we've got big data too now. No. So that is just one measure. That's just, yeah.
They're being sold.
Well, actually, they are being offered, but nobody's buying them.
But are they actually big data, these things, or are they just like being sold as that?
It's a technology stack from the big data world, now bundled into something that, on one hand, may be very expensive, but on the other may not be very effective.
Okay, so if I'm a company and I have, for example, a large data warehouse, and I'm, say, spending a couple of $1 million a year on it, how can big data emulate that? I mean, can it do the same thing, or is it a different thing? I mean, you might have a cluster of SQL databases and you have business intelligence on top of it.
So what you have to realize is that what I keep talking about, this foundation, this Hadoop cluster thing, is exactly what is behind Amazon, Google, Facebook, everything else. You see blindingly fast response times. You never lose data. Backup is never taken because you just store everything and you keep the new version and all that stuff. There is therefore not any operations. There are no DBAs and no sysadmins in this world. Ours. And this storage and CPU massive thing can be used, for instance, to just put data warehouses, non-volatile data regions down here, and then use whatever analytics and what have you are available, reporting tools and all that. They're all available.
So you're saying you can store the same data but in...
And then you can parallelize it massively. And that means that, as one of my friends in England who does big clusters for some government contractors, he says, one of the hardest things for them to understand is that the response time is so fast. They always think that the query or the program must be broken since it returns so fast. It's what we see with Google and Facebook and all that. You push like, and 800 million people can see it. And the original Yahoo engineers, by the way, now work for Facebook, which is why Facebook are the most advanced guys in this field at the moment.
Isn't there something called, is it Pig SQL on top of...
Pig and Hive,
so you can do like SQL
Scoop
type stuff
Kafka
on top.
And yeah.
So you can have like normal SQL queries. Yeah.
And there's a wild company at the moment called Splice that says they will do an Oracle compliant database that will do ACID transactions and ANSI SQL and what have you on top of Hadoop, and they just received a lot of venture capital funding.
So if I'm a company, say in Denmark, and I have a large investment in IT in existing systems, and I wanted to move to big data, what would be the pitch?
Call me first of all. Okay. Joking. Seriously, you start out by building a modest Hadoop cluster. It could be 8 nodes, it could be 12 nodes, it could be 20 nodes. It's still cheaper than any one server you buy from HP, IBM, whatever. And then you start using it as an archival platform. You forget about all the backup procedures. You forget about your backup tapes, your backup disks, and your backup robots. And you just store it here.
But is it stored in your company or
if you want, or you can do it up in some cloud. There are many cloud vendors offering this. But that's how you sneak it in and get people used to it. Then when they slowly realize, holy cow, this is what Facebook, Google, the others are talking about. This is stable. This is cool. This is cheap and very scalable. You just add 10 more if you're flooded by success. Then you start doing the real stuff and migrating. That, of course, means migrating applications, and that is always an interesting experience, of course. But as a storage and magnificent CPU platform, it's fantastic. SyncSort, which is used by many mainframe customers in the world, have actually been aggressive with this all the time and have said, why on earth would you spend 45 minutes computing something on a massively expensive mainframe when you could do it down here? So do whatever you have to do to run mainframe programs on mainframes. Might be hard to move. But storage and CPU power and all that, don't do that on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're here in Denmark, of course, at the moment, but who's actually, or which large companies are doing this and what they're using big data architectures for at the moment, maybe in Scandinavia or in Europe?
Very few. So, Spotify, WIMP, and those guys.
Spotify's in Sweden, is it?
Yes. Okay. WIMP is run from here. And
what is WIMP?
It's another music
thing.
Yeah. But basically, this whole thing has not reached Scandinavia yet, basically. In the UK, Tesco Mobile just transformed their whole thing. And there is talk about that BBC wants to copy that move. In the US, all the companies, they're all doing this stuff. In Denmark, not so much yet.
Okay, so we were talking about which companies in Scandinavia are using big data, and you were talking about Spotify. So does this mean that it's mostly startups are using it at the moment? Or?
Yeah, those that need to web scale. And Spotify is, of course, a good example of that. It will be the same with Netflix in the US and all those things. They need to massively scale things that is not possible in the old world. You can't do this with IBM, Oracle, Microsoft technology. You just hit the limit. Amazon, for instance, really tried with MySQL, and they did everything they possibly could. and they made a huge dedicated data center to just tweak and fiddle and make MySQL work until they hit, I think, maybe 1,000 billion rows or something like that. And then they just couldn't do more. That's when they wrote a new database, which has different names, but is now called REAC, for instance.
Oh yeah, I know.
And that's why they suddenly were stuck with a massive extra data center with a lot of capacity for MySQL that they didn't have any use for, and hence they invented the web services.
Okay.
To sell out, because they just had all this crap they didn't need anymore.
So is a lot of this becoming possible and commercially viable now because the cost of storage has gone down so much? Because one of the things that we talked about in the break was that you don't have to throw data away anymore, and you can just timestamp data, and you can do like for example, there's a database called Datomic, and you just when you do when you make a question to the database, you say what time you want the data from as well. Is this how a lot of big data stores will work?
Yeah. The price of storage is going to be close to zero in 2 years' time.
This could be a problem though, because this means that companies will never delete your data.
That is true, and that is what is happening in most places. But yeah, I don't care.
It will be cheaper to keep your data than delete it.
It will. There is also some evolution in the whole data warehouse field where some of us at least have done work. In that the usual ETL process, extract, transform data and then load it, is now not ETL but ELTTTT.
Which
you,
is?
You extract something, you find that, whoa, here's some data that, well, yeah, and you just load it as a lump without knowing what is in it.
Okay.
In extreme cases. And then later you use part of it for transformation 1 and keep the result. Part of it for transformation 2, part of it for transformation 3.
Okay.
So you don't have to filter before you load. So instead of ETL, you have now ELT3, as we call it.
So I don't understand. What's the benefit of this? I mean, is it...
Well, first of all, the ability to just load all the data you find without having to make decisions about whether you are only going to need part of it.
Okay, sure.
Second, just keep all the various transformations or crazy things you come up with.
So how is this going to change companies which use a lot of IT? I mean, I know this has happened in the States already, but how is it going to change how they work and the IT departments work and how they do business?
So the whole, as I call it, revolution that I'm seeing at the moment, the reason that conferences in the US, big data conferences and NoSQL conferences, basically look like rock festivals in the 70s, is that this whole idea that you don't really need traditional DBAs and sysadmins, and also you need fast stuff and you need fast reactions and fast releases of new versions and all continuous release cycles and what have you. All this consists of a number of developments. One is absolutely the whole big data thing. One is the NoSQL database revolution, where you now have more than 100 different NoSQL databases. Some of them can do very specialized things in one way and some in other ways. People are using them. We will see a landscape with many different databases in the future. DevOps, the idea that development and operations are close together instead of being in silos with 3 weeks, 3 months handovers. All that stuff is driving a whole new way of doing IT, which young people get and old people don't get. And moving that into an existing company with lots of boring auditors and old people like us is going to be difficult at the best of times. The IT departments in most companies have become the monster that the business side wanted them to become. They now...
Well, the monster that they hate.
Yes,
yeah.
But they have created it because they wanted predictability and prioritization and structures and processes and procedures and rules. And also they would like the IT people to smell a little better, dress a little better, all that kind of thing. And that is what you have today. You have basically poured cement into the org chart from above, and it's impossible now to get anything done. You can see how this graduate, wild in his eyes, fresh out of Copenhagen Business School, comes running and says, I have this great idea. And IT goes, well, we can put it on the committee for the initial talk in 3 months' time, and we should be able to start coding in 1 year's time. So this is what is happening everywhere, and hence competitors have advantages now that the old companies don't have. But also we will see what I term IT2 departments being created now. In desperation, business people will create what I call AFGM teams, a few good men, inside the business units.
Yeah, we're already seeing that.
Yes, yeah. And I'm seeing it also in the public sector. Out of desperation because they can't get anything through and they need to be faster. But they are constantly helping the IT business slow down themselves. And the worst thing the IT business do these days, the worst thing they do is prioritizing. Because as soon as you talk about prioritizing, what gets chosen every time is the oldest and the biggest. Never the new stuff. Never the things that could save the business.
So what you're talking about is that big data, the reason it's not taken off yet is because there's also organizational change.
Totally.
And so a company can't just buy a big data system and everything's going to be perfect. There's certain things that have to change in the company itself. And once they change that, then big data will also allow the company to move faster with new ideas. And so instead of having like every 6 months they release new software, maybe every day or week or something.
40 times a day.
Okay, but they could be more agile or whatever.
Absolutely. In some of the companies that I know of in the US, 2 minutes of downtime it'll basically cost them something like $8,000 per second.
Okay.
So then it becomes interesting to not have downtime. My friend James Maul in England did a provocative keynote for the Finnish Oracle user group, where he talked about this new world, which he is working in now also, where he said back in the 80s, IT departments consisted of 50% geniuses, 50% good IT people, and 1% idiots. These days, IT departments consist of 50% idiots that are basically capable of reading what the vendor says they should do and then click and do that. 50% good IT people and 1% geniuses. In the new world, we need to go back to actually have real geniuses, very good IT people, and 1% idiots, because you need to put these things together yourself and keep a balance and be intelligent about it.
But isn't this changing?
And this means that the existing IT organizations typically are useless.
But isn't this something, I'd have thought that this is where companies are changing and they're thinking we want to give more tools, like you said, to the business people itself to get rid of the IT departments eventually.
I hope so. I sincerely hope they do, because these monsters that they created themselves have become the problem.
Because there's a lot of tools that people are trying to develop so that it puts the power back into business users' hands.
Back into the super users where they belong. It's much better to make, I think, a super user an IT guy than trying to do the reverse.
Correct.
So all this is putting, of course, an interesting pressure on an organization where, for instance, the CIO is part of the board of directors and will maybe defend or maybe at least have an interesting situation with his IT department. If they suddenly go, let's hire 3 of these wild-eyed young Turks to do this instead of trying to get it through this in-moving object called the IT department.
So what's going to happen to the companies that don't change to big data and change their organization and things like that? What's going to happen to them?
Well, if they have a very strong market position, if they are near monopolies or duopolies or something like that, inefficient structures can survive for an amazing long time. That's what we're seeing in a lot of Danish companies too. A lot of you can basically spot them. They're the ones that can afford to implement SAP. Okay. If you can afford that, which is a show of strength, because it's inefficient, it's totally inflexible, it's very, very expensive, and you're stuck. And changes cannot be made within 6 months or 9 months time frames. And all those things that we know now, if you can actually survive and produce a profit based on all these old things, you must have something close to a monopoly.
You don't have to name specific ones, but which ones do you think are in trouble here?
I think I was asked by the Ministry of whatever, industry and what have you, in a survey. They questioned me for 2 hours. Can you name specific industries where big data would benefit, i.e. what they were talking about, where we can pour state money into something? That's what, it's the only thing the state can come up with these days. And I said, please don't meddle, please don't interfere, please don't make things bad. Stay out of it, but this will be relevant for all industries. It will be relevant for retail. It will be relevant for banking. It will be relevant for production sites, for all sorts of places. And hence it will be non-relevant for none. It will be a possibility for all businesses. Now, it doesn't have to be a 1,000-node cluster. It could be just 8 servers bound together in your server room, just creating the cheapest platform you ever got. But it also creates a platform where young programmers would like to work.
So is part of this about attracting good developers?
Yes. Those that still have the fire in their eyes.
Do you think a lot of, you've been around a bit, so you've seen how IT has changed, and I've seen as well how developers have changed from being nerds to today. So how would you describe that change that's happened in people who work in IT?
Well, we are back in the 80s again. We're back in the happy 80s again, where badly dressed people that may wash or may not wash, joke, will work at odd hours and have lots of ideas, make many mistakes, but also create things we haven't seen before.
So what happened in the middle?
Sorry.
Was it a bad time? Is that what you're saying, or it was?
It's in the middle of the 90s. You're talking about the 90s and the zeros. We got what is commonly now referred to as the best of breed products. The Oracle databases, the EMC stores, the SAP ERP system, yada yada yada. And they have run their course. What is universal when I talk to people inside these organizations in different countries is this: existing customers usually don't move away from them. They have the Stockholm syndrome. And they're stuck with a lot of applications and a lot of old programmers that have become weird. And
you mean people who don't want to change?
Yeah. It's not possible. It's simply not possible to do this change. And this is now something they'll be stuck with for a while. It will drag them down until they have to do something desperate. The IT2 things that we are beginning to see, the alternatives to this. But we got stuck in the 90s and the zeros.
So what's Fair and Square doing? Which is your
traditional stuff? Oracle, IBM, programming, project management, all that traditional stuff, while we're waiting for the revolution.
Okay. Now you've also got a very interesting history. Could you tell us a bit about that?
So I got into IT. I was an economist. I got into IT.
You're an economist?
Yes.
Okay. Where were you working?
Copenhagen University. And then I got interested in IT. After my military service, my godmother in Texas asked me if I would like to attend a university over there for a year at her expense. So I spent a year at Louisiana State Universities. Doing computer science and history.
I was going to ask you earlier because you had some sort of connection to the States.
And I had absolutely no interest in computer science, but she had worked with computers back in the 50s and 60s.
I think people forget that a lot of people were women who were developers in the early days.
Clever women, lots of them. And she insisted. She said, this will be big, back in 82. Whatever. I was interested in politics and economics. So I was allowed to do that as my second thing, but I had to do my Pascal programming and what have you. Came back and couldn't get into to the computer science faculty here because my grades were appalling from way back in the gymnasium. They were very good from the US, but that doesn't count here because Danes are much better than everybody else. And then I started in Polit, which is political science, economics, and all that stuff. But my friend Ole, that lived in the same kitchen in Rigshospital's nurse dormitory, he said he got me an IT job because everybody knew that I had studied computer science in the US, which meant that I was very hot in the 80s. And then suddenly I had 3 IT jobs, student jobs, and then suddenly he offered me a full-time job in the company he worked in. Spent a year there, then moved to a bank, and became an Oracle DBA, although I wanted to become a PC supporter. But they had just gotten a new Oracle database, and I was put together with a guy named Mogens to find out how that relational database worked. Spent 3.5 years there, then joined the dark side Oracle. Spent 10 years there.
So who is this Mogens? So
his name is Mogens Egan, and it's a very unusual name. It hasn't been cool since the 30s. Nobody is ever going to be called Mogens again in Denmark. It's over. It's over. But we were 2 Mogenses, and when I left Unibank, which has now become Nordea, in 1990, we had the biggest and baddest Oracle database in Denmark. It was 6 gigabytes. Wow. I think I can store more on my glasses today. Then I spent 10 years inside Oracle doing various things. Ended up as a manager for a rather elite team called Premium Services with about 40 people. And then that was closed globally. And then I founded Miracle together with a friend of mine that I had known since 7th grade.
So what year was this when you founded it?
This was in year 2000.
Okay.
And so that grew, and we moved into big buildings, and we had several offices in Denmark. And
what was the original idea behind it? Because this is an interesting...
My friend Lasse called me and said he was tired of his job as CFO in a windmill brake factory company. And he said, you must have contacts in the IT world, and I know how to keep the banks happy.
Okay.
And that was it. And then I hired a bunch of my guys from the elite unit, because it had been closed down.
Okay.
And then we started 8 people in my garage in 2000.
So he got the customers?
No, I got them.
Well, you got the customers?
Yeah, because I had spent a lot of years talking to Oracle customers. And they knew me, and then they closed down this unit that they had used a lot. Well, the customers were still there, the problems were still there.
I've seen a lot of your marketing videos, actually. And the one about installing a database with your nose.
Yes, the nose job video.
One.
Yes. Have you also seen the one where I'm naked in my office?
No, I didn't look at that one.
All right. So, joking aside, Miracle is now 300 to 400 people, 3 to 400 million kroner and all that. But in mid 2013, my partner evidently got tired of me and had me kicked out. And that is what happens. It's hard. It's a rather rough thing to experience.
Could you elaborate on it a bit? Was it fair? Was it fair what happened, or was it behind closed doors, or?
So I can, in this video, publish one detail that people don't know yet. I haven't used it yet. When my partner and the head of the board, Jan Skelbæk, they came and suddenly were standing outside my door at my private home at 10 o'clock in the morning. One day I thought, this is probably not good.
Okay.
And I turned on the recorder in my iPhone without them noticing it.
Okay.
Unfortunately, when somebody calls, the recording is turned off. So, after 7 minutes and 7 seconds, a friend of mine that used to be chief editor of Computer World called me. And I thought it would continue recording after I canceled the call. It didn't. So I only have 7 minutes and 7 seconds. In those 7 minutes, I'm perfectly happy to publish it now. I ask my partner 3 times, why? I ask him 3 times, why? You are tired of me? Okay, we have to part. Why? And he says, there are many reasons. And I respond, well, can you name the big ones or some of them or something? And he replies, I don't want to go into detail. And that happens 3 times, that circle. So, the really funny thing is, I have many theories about why I got fired, why he got tired of me. And I still don't know why I was fired.
Have you, I take it are you on speaking terms at all?
No.
Okay.
But since a few people know me in the IT business, I can see that everybody knows why I was fired, and it's all different reasons. Okay. So, for instance, my girlfriend, she has an ex-husband who's in IT also, and he knows why I was fired, and has of course told their daughter that, and she comes back and says, "Oh, so you were fired because of this and that?" And I go, "Okay." But so that has actually mentally been a rather interesting journey. To know that everybody knows why I was fired, but I honestly, to this date, don't know.
Was it unexpected at the time?
Totally.
And how did you feel when that happened? Okay.
It was my life.
So, did you feel betrayed, or did you feel,
absolutely,
or did you?
Absolutely. It was what we in Danish call a kongemord.
I don't know what that means.
A murder of the king. It was a knife in the back. I told the head of the board, Jan Skelbæk, that a head of the board has the obligation, if one of the founders doesn't like the other anymore, he needs to make sure that they either get back on speaking terms and work together, or that they get a nice divorce.
Okay.
But his job is not to talk to one dissatisfied founder and then go and fire the other without talking to him. That is not what a head of the board does. And he has said to me that in this particular situation, I didn't do my job well enough. And that's probably all I'll ever get out of him.
I'd only ever heard good things, because I've been told by people such good things about the service, about and support and stuff like that. And so it was quite surprising for me when I'd heard about that you were fired from this company.
Yeah. I got so many nice reactions from people. The Computer World chief editor, the Version 2 chief editors, they both called me and said, don't they know how much free press they get? Don't they know that you are the company? So everybody has been telling me these kind of very nice things, that you are a miracle, and all those fantastic things. Excellent and good. Sometimes I even believe it myself. But I still got fired. I still lost my baby. And that has been a rough thing to do. It's nice to know when people are... I mean, the pain is fading.
It's an interesting point, because a lot of people start companies, and some people just do it because they think they'll, become wealthy. But you have to be like crazy about that, what you're doing to actually do one.
Yes, and in Denmark, the worst thing that can happen to you is that you have success in starting up a company. As long as you are a few people in a startup company, people regard you as kind of a hero. Crazy, brave, and it's good you're doing it, but if you ever pass something like 20 employees, the mood changes, and the reaction in Denmark is, well, that's easy for you to say, because you have your fat CEO job and everything is easy for you. That's how it is. You don't have a single political party in Denmark that actually is interested in any which way in small private companies. The left-wing parties, the Social Democrats, the SF, the Enhedslisten, and all those people are very, very interested in promoting big public companies. All the other companies, including Liberal Alliance and all those guys, parties, are very interested in helping the big private companies like Lego, Novo, Carlsberg, and Maersk. Nobody is interested in those small companies that actually provide a lot of jobs, and a lot of jobs for new graduates and all that stuff. And it's the same if you succeed. Everybody goes, yeah. You can deduct everything and everything. The reality of it is, even if you succeed, even if you go to 50 or 100 or 200 as we did, 300, you still risk almost everything on a weekly basis. These decisions you have to make.
When you were doing this company, how many times was the company at death or near death when you were doing it? How close did you get? Or were you ever close?
We started late 2000. In 2003, there was a downturn in the whole economy. That's, by the way, where after that downturn, Google became a reality. Nobody was using Google before 2003. Whenever there's a downturn in the IT business, something revolutionary happens. And in 2003, we had a minor downturn. And we lost 100,000 kroner the first month in January, 300,000 in February, and 500,000 in March. And my partner said to me, we now have to start firing, because this is bad. And then we did some stuff, and we survived and all that. But that's the closest we've been.
How did that feel to you personally when that was happening?
I believed still that we were on the right track. We might have to fire a few people and all that usual crap you have to do, but we would survive. It wasn't like I was nervous. My partner was. He was responsible for the finances, and he was the one not sleeping at night. And I thank him still for taking that part of the job. Basically, as an old failed economist, I must say that in general, the Danish economy looks healthy at the moment. There is just
it looks healthy from which vantage point?
Well, from the GDP, gross national income, all those measures. The real unemployment is being hidden by all sorts of public measures, which is just hiding it. But basically, the big problem is no new jobs are being created. The Danish companies were fantastic in investing in new stuff in 2014, but they invested it abroad.
But I thought there was low unemployment here.
Yeah. That's because everybody is parked on something called education or something like that, just to
so they don't count as unemployed. So money's coming out of the system.
Yeah. We in 1973, we passed the magic mark of 50% of people that can vote being paid by the state, either by being public employees or being on some kind of support.
Okay, and now?
Today, right before the election in 2011, we passed 66%.
So 66% of people are working for the government?
No, 1.2, 1.3 million people are working for the government. The official number is 865,000 something, but that's because you converted to full-time employees. The biggest group are the ones working for the communes, and 75 to 80% of those working for the communes are women, and most of them are on reduced work time, 32 hours or less. So therefore, it's 1.2, 1.3 million people working in the public sector. Converted to full-time employees, you get 860 something thousand. And then you have, 2 million something of people that are on various kind of transfer incomes and what have you. Some are unemployed, some are pre-pensioners and age pensioners and what have you. So the biggest problem we have is, if you want to get the power, you have to promise more to these two groups of people.
Okay.
Otherwise, you won't get the power.
And how does that affect startups, though?
Nobody's interested in them. Nobody's interested.
Because people are being paid already?
Well, the unemployed, the pre-pensioners, everybody else, they don't work. The public sectors, they don't work. These are the ones you need to vote for you. And we saw with our current Prime Minister that she promised them the world. She promised them even more than the right wings did. Hence, she got the power. Fortunately, she has been the bravest politician I have seen in Denmark so far, since I was born in '61. Because she then turned around and simply didn't want to keep her promises, because they would have destroyed Denmark, of course.
You know, she's actually married to Neil Kinnock's son.
Yeah. But she did all the brave things together with her government. They tried to save Denmark after these catastrophic years with Anders Fogh Rasmussen, who just spent a hell of a lot of money on everything. He was just a social democrat on steroids. The next time, we will probably then elect Lars Løkke Rasmussen, God help us, who is promising even more now for these two big groups. God help us if he keeps his promises.
So are you saying that helping these different groups is going to be bad for startups and creating new wealth in the future? So what will happen to Denmark? Is it something that will suddenly hit Denmark in a bad way? Or?
My friend Ole, my partner, has said 10 years ago, Mogens, this culture is going down, and I see two possibilities. Either a complete financial breakdown, so that we can then recreate a society where people work and are happy to be here. Or we will have a land war with many dead and several cities destroyed, so that we can rebuild society.
Okay.
I then, in 2009, out of my kind heart, suggested the third option, namely that I become dictator of Denmark.
Okay.
With the motto listed D, then you only have to vote once more.
Okay.
So that is basically what will probably happen. We will outsource all sorts of things to other countries where they are better, cheaper, and faster.
Okay.
And better educated, everything else, and that's how it will go until we have to finally hit the bottom and then rebuild.
So with your own startup, Fair & Square, did you find some things harder than they should be?
So the bank that supported Miracle from the beginning and watched me and my partner grow the business and have profit every year for 13 years in a row, and probably 14 years in a row, which is not something many companies do. They didn't even want to support me with 1 million kroner or less.
Okay.
When I started the new thing.
That's amazing.
That is how it is.
Okay.
That's how it is.
So if what would your advice be to someone who wanted to start a company? Because some people say just
do it in another country.
Okay.
Get out of this country. The whole startup scene is so much more vibrant in Stockholm, in Berlin, in London. There are a lot of people calling themselves entrepreneurs, startups, and all those. 90% of them are students at CBS, Copenhagen Business School, or some other things, that are taking classes, mandatory classes, from people that have never started anything up, about how to be an entrepreneur.
These entrepreneurs or whatever, they want to be, but as soon as it's a bad day,
they are not, and they have not risked anything, they have not started anything, they have not created any jobs, they have not created any action.
They all think they're going to be like Mark Zuckerberg in 2 years.
Yeah. And they will, probably impress the girls at various parties with, I'm an entrepreneur. No, you're not. I was talking to a person recently who is hiring people at the moment, and they have to be high-grade people. And he said to me, I'm in Stockholm. There are a lot of high-grade people and a lot of entrepreneurs that have failed but are very good to hire. Why is that not possible in Denmark? And I said, that's because there are no failed entrepreneurs, because there are no entrepreneurs. There are a few. The rest of it is just big smoke and no fire. And it's all due to the whole thing we have at the moment, where we are fascinated, we Danes, by big public companies and big private companies, although we also hate them. But I was talking recently to 4 women that both have small independent businesses in transport, in medicine, and what have you. And I said to them, I think when I'm at a party and they ask me, what are you doing? And I say, well, I have this small company. They go, oh, that's interesting.
Okay.
So whenever people that have small private companies are at parties here, people will ask them, so what are you doing? And if they say, well, I have a transport company with 60 lorries, people will go, yeah, that's interesting. And then they will turn and talk to people that work in the ministry of something, or that work for Novo, Maersk, yada, yada, yada. It is simply not viewed as being interesting or cool to actually dare to create anything. We are so risk averse at the moment that it's heartbreaking.
Okay. So I think with that we'll close off. So thanks a lot for today, Mogens.
You are most welcome.
And
it was a pleasure.
Talk offline.